Oh hey, didn't see you there. You just caught me dreading the very thought of living in a world without Hatsune Miku. Now I know what you're thinking, but Green, Hatsune Miku doesn't exist. Thankfully Gandhi built this before he kicked the bucket. How do I look? Virtual reality, or more commonly VR, is a simulated experience which can be very similar or different from that of real life. With our current technology, virtual reality systems use headsets to generate realistic sounds and environments for the player to explore. Essentially, a VR headset is a head-mounted display with a small screen in front of your eyes. VR typically utilizes auditory and video feedback in order to create these environments. Within these artificial worlds, players can look and move around as well as interact with objects. VR as we know it was first introduced in 2013 with the introduction of the Oculus Rift. However, there have been earlier attempts at VR dating back to the 1980s. The most notable being Mattel's Power Glove and Nintendo's Virtual Boy. Of course, both of these failed. Most people blame on the fact that they were never really thought through and the tech was too early to take VR to its full potential, but I blame on the fact that Mattel and Nintendo didn't want to steal the Rift's thunder. Research into virtual reality started as early as 1968, but most equipment was too expensive for commercial use. As this technology was very early in development, the use for video games was very limited. Plus, your first thought when developing highly advanced virtual reality hardware is not, fuck it, let's put Mario in there. Interest in VR grew in the 90s with the film Lawnmower Man, which boosted the popularity of VR headsets in the general public. Reflection Technology Incorporated, or RTI, were developing a head-mounted stereoscopic head-tracking system using LED displays. RTI needed bigger funding for much larger production, so they licensed the tech to Nintendo under Gunpei Yokoi. Nintendo developed the Virtual Boy, released in 1995. Of course, Nintendo didn't want the Virtual Boy to cost a small house, so they had to cut some corners, that being the all red and black display, instead of using full colored ones. Which is fine, it's just similar to playing games while your eyes are bleeding. God, I love Mario! Due to both the tripod design intended for use on desk and the all red LED display, it caused a high strain to consumers' necks and eyes. A grand total of 22 games were ever released on the Virtual Boy. It was clear that the tech was just never ready, but oddly the Virtual Boy was the only 32-bit console that Nintendo ever released. Have you ever pioneered VR gaming, then for it to be tossed aside and forgotten as a failed console, only for VR to be picked up again in 2013? Yeah, me neither, we're looking at you, Nintendo. It wasn't until the 2010s and above that consumer-friendly VR parts were lowering in price and becoming more affordable. So in 2013, the developer of the Rift, Palmer Luckey, announced that they had been working on an inexpensive virtual headset for video games. The announcement caused other companies to develop their own VR headsets. Sony develops the PlayStation VR, Valve partners with HTC and makes the HTC Vive, and this thing was almost identical to the ones we see in movies. You have controllers for both your hands and would set up two base stations in the corner of your room, as they act like cameras to track head and hand movements by flooding the room with non-visible light. Valve later made a VR headset of their own, without the help of HTC, called the Valve Index, which was released in 2019. However, there exist gaming VR headsets that use the power of your phone. Google decided to release Cardboard, which was dumb and stupid, and let's hope it never happens again. This is called foreshadowing. Yeah, Google Cardboard was a thing, however it was mainly for videos on YouTube and such. The only thing it could track was your head movements using the gyro sensor already built into your phone. Google Cardboard was literally a step up from just taping your phone to your eyes. But hey, Samsung tossed their hat into the ring with the Samsung Gear, which is still for your phone but now has a touchpad on the side for you to play games. I actually had the Samsung Gear given to me on my... what are they called again? My birthday! It was a really cool concept, but didn't allow for the full capacity of VR. All that were allowed on the store were phone games adapted for VR. I played it for about 3 days and never picked it up again. However, on April 12, 2019, Nintendo released a VR kit for the Nintendo Switch. And it was a stupid piece of cardboard. Oh, come on! Remember that foreshadowing I mentioned earlier? I never really felt the desire or need for a VR headset. Games were coming out for VR and a lot of people were throwing out phrases such as the future of gaming. I knew that I wanted to have one of my own, but I was willing to wait to get one. Then, on my 18th birthday, my friend gave me his HP Reverb G2 for free. Unlike the HTC Vive, the Reverb has cameras on the front and sides of the headset, which are used to track the movements of the controllers through the use of bright LED lights. This is cool, but cheaper. and less accurate. Some movements may not be read properly, and putting your hands to places where the cameras cannot see the controllers will cause the headset to not detect them, meaning that your hands will stay frozen in their last known position until you bring them into the camera's cone of vision. Areas that are general no-no zones include your back, above your head, or anywhere below you, which kind of sucks as many games require that you reach behind your back or at your hip for weapons. Not only that, but it severely limits how creative you can be in VR. Even with these problems, getting weapons from behind you still works most of the time, but doesn't quite feel clean. Let's talk about some of the VR games I own. I can talk about my opinion on them, and you can quietly nod and disagree. As is tradition, I'll be rating my games on a scale of 1 to 9. Cooking Simulator VR is obviously a cooking game. At first I wasn't sold at the idea of a game that's all about cooking, but wanted to give it a spin after watching some gameplay from a non-VR version of the game. I can safely say that this is my favorite VR game, which is funny because I have both Boneworks and Blade and Sorcery. The chaos of running around and panicking about virtual food is really fun. I like how the game feels and plays. It's so cool just to make food in this environment. Not to mention, this game reignited my love for food and made me want to cook. If you enjoy simulation games, cooking, or you're just really into the idea of a cooking VR game, then this game is perfect and you won't regret your purchase. I'm giving this game a 9 out of 9. Boneworks is an absolute treat of a game. When VR gets brought up, most people will point at it. It has set the standard for what VR games can and should be. It's a physics-based action game set in a semi-open environment, filled with enemies that you can take out with an impressive roster of weapons. It isn't some on-rail shooter and it isn't some wave-based game, although you can unlock a wave game mode within the game. It feels like Half-Life for VR. Boneworks has really fun melee and ranged weapons, though a lot of weapons can feel very similar to each other but with different coats of paint. A lot of people have called this game a John Wick simulator, which is exactly right. The manual reloading, bullet time, action sequences hit every beat to make you feel as kick-ass as possible. The climbing mechanics, gunplay, physics make for one of the best experiences VR ever. I'm giving Boneworks an 8 out of 9. The final game I want to talk about is Blade and Sorcery. This is a wave-based survival game in a fantasy setting with knights and magic. This is a great game if you want to swing a sword around or use magic. The swordplay is freaky solid and can lead to a lot of badass moments. It has a pretty weak lineup of weapons, however. This can be fixed with the use of mods, allowing you to add so much more into the game, such as new combat scenarios, weapons, and arenas. It's really fun and the combat is really polished. I give Blade and Sorcery an 8 out of 9. VR is a great thing, good for it, but I just don't see it taking over games as we know it. I have no doubt in my mind that there will be more VR games in the future, but I just don't see the controller or the mouse and keyboard disappearing anytime soon. As more and more time goes on, people are getting more interested in the idea of virtual reality, which is great because VR is getting cheaper and cheaper, and game devs can spend more time making VR centralized games such as Boneworks and Half-Life Alyx. However, I do have my fair share of problems with VR. Don't even get me started on the VR side effects. For example, we got nausea, dizziness, disorientation, and the permanent need to spew your gaming-related opinions all over the internet.